Luna Rose, the rightful leader of the Nightrise pack, has been living under an assumed identity amidst betrayal and power struggles. Can she reclaim her destiny and her rightful place? As Lincolndale threatens her, how will she protect her pack from the ravages of war? Join our pack. Subscribe to start your adventure. 27 United. After those 2 words of recognition and submission, a silence had settled over the pack and everyone's eyes were trained sorely on my face, which was pale because of shock. I opened my mouth but then shut it, not being able to find the right words to tell the pack. Is it true? A man called out from the back of the pack bravely. Is Luna Rose Conrad actually an alpha? Arden looked at me for permission, and when I gave it he nodded firmly, gesturing towards me with one hand. Your Luna is the true alpha of the Nightrise pack. She was wrongfully stripped the right of leading the pack her father had nurtured by having treason committed in one of the most serious ways in the werewolf world, the hands of his trusted beta. These past few attacks have been an attempt by Lincolndale to overthrow the alpha of all packs, but his main desire is solely focused on us for more than one reason. His eyes flitted towards me briefly. Gasps echoed around the pack with the majority of their lips parted in surprise. Their eyes had turned black, signaling the dominant presence of their wolves that were all in sync with their alpha's anger. He has given us an ultimatum, Arden. I murmured. This isn't his first time. He is not going to get what's mine. He snarled. So this is what Arden has been keeping from me. I felt my irritation rise and simultaneously a fear too. We are not going to have a war over me. I stated with wide eyes, and I saw Arden stiffen completely. We are not going to give you up if that's what you're thinking is a suitable remedy. He replied with a clipped tone. If that war takes place, blood will be shed. And I do not want to be responsible for the children and pack members that would die just cause their alpha was too selfish to put his mate in danger. I exclaimed, barely aware of the words that were escaping my mouth. Arden's eyes flashed and both his hands held my fisted ones tightly. You're not just my mate, you're my Luna, you're the pack's Luna. You have 2 very large packs of werewolves depending on this, Rose. You said that the Nightrise pack is good but their leaders are bad, right? Then why don't you want to help them by returning their alpha's daughter to her rightful position of power? He asked me, holding me close to his body. I could feel his breath fan my face and I was suddenly aware of everyone's eyes on us. I don't want your pack to turn against you. I mind-linked him after a very long time of staring. My pack would never, they are loyal and trust me, little rogue. He replied. They may trust you now, but the loss of loved ones can make a person do crazy things. I tried to convince him, but he stood with his stormy eyes peering into my soul. There will not be any loss, I won't let it happen. He said, confident in his words. It's inevitable, Arden. I growled internally. I didn't want to be a fake optimist. I was a realist and I had to voice my concerns. It's not lit, Luna Rose. May I speak? The woman who came forward to speak was Charlie, Wesley's wife. She was protectively clutching her belly, but she had determination clear on her face. You don't need to ask, Charlie. I gave her a small smile. I, as a pack member, do not want you to give yourself up to Lincolndale, as it would make us seem weak and incapable of protecting our Luna, but that is only the technical reason. She paused. As a pack we have come to care for you, and your being around us brings a peace and sense of belonging that Alpha Arden could not give us alone. She gave the mentioned an apologetic smile. We need you here, and so do the innocents from the other pack, and if needed I would fight for you with my whole life. So would I. Wesley stepped forward, wrapping an arm around his mate and giving her a loving smile. It had been a long time since I saw my older friend. He looked well. Drew stepped forward from the crown with his hand raised in the air. My heart and my body is at your disposal, Luna. Castile grinned and Arden growled a warning growl. A light laugh emitted from the mouth of the ladies of the pack, and I had no doubt that Castile did that to lighten the tensed atmosphere. So would we. Benjamin and his mate stepped forward, and in the next moment the entire pack had pledged their alliance. There was not one person who was hesitant to come forward, and none of them seemed bitter or forced. They all gave us genuine smiles, and I heard a "we are going to kick those sorry asses" from somewhere close by. Little rogue. Arden whispered into my ear, and I instinctively shrunk into his body, which was pressed on my dorsal side. Yes. I'm not going to let you go, and you're going to have guards around you all the time, he said, and I pulled away. Don't you trust me? I pouted. A little too much. I trust your selflessness and your guilt to snatch you away from me. He said. I knew that he was right. I had thought about surrendering myself without him knowing, but I ruled that option out as soon as our pack expressed their wishes. The lifeless form of the messenger had been taken away and most probably buried away. His family at least deserved a goodbye. Lincoln was a greedy man who would not ever keep his word. He always wanted more. I've become the typical female self-sacrificing protagonist of a best-selling teenage novel, haven't I? I sighed. The rest of the pack was busy chatting with a renewed vigor. A lot of them had already dispersed, emotionally exhausted by the day's events. No, Arden said with fake shock and amusement twinkling in his eyes. You're the antagonist who stole too many hearts. He finished cheesily. Well, I did warm your ice-cold heart. I teased him. Well, of course, he exclaimed. I didn't have a chance against your ethereal beauty, my little rogue. I blinked my eyelashes rapidly and twirled my hair around my finger, purposely dragging out the action. Oh really? I grinned. He hummed in response, burning her face in my hair. I kissed his mark and he groaned. Don't do this here, little rogue. I don't want to give these people a show. My eyes widened. You wouldn't. I laughed. Try me. 28-something broken. It had been 2 days since the ultimatum had been given to our pack from Lincoln. 2 days of silence and anticipation of the future. Arden had buried himself in papers full of strategies and plans drawn out to perfection, and ideas had been spilling out from the mind of various pack warriors and regular members who were determined to protect what was theirs. We had the full support of 3 packs, and with that came the calmness of knowing that we wouldn't be alone against the unknown. I stood up from the seat I was sitting at and walked to the window, watching the sun peeking out from behind the thick white clouds, giving an impression to the world outside that everything was fine. Rosie. I heard Drew call out to me and I spun on my heel with a curious look. Do you need something, Drew? I asked, and he shook his head, standing beside me. He fidgeted with the cloth of the curtains. No, I just came to check on you. He smiled. Don't worry, Drew, I'm not going to run away, and anyway, Wesley won't let me. I faked a scowl and then we both let out a soft laugh. Arden kept true to his promise of not letting me stay without guards, so he put Drew and Wesley to babysit me again, even though the 2 of them would be more useful doing something that they were actually positioned in the pack to do instead. I know you're not going to run away, but Arden doesn't believe you. He thinks you'll be swayed by the cloud of sadness that is hovering over our heads. He informed me, and I sighed. I just can't help but think that what if someone gets hurt? Castile James, you Charlotte and her unborn baby. I let out my fears. Arden will try his best to ensure that no one gets hurt, Rosie. He tried to assure me. But what if in that attempt he gets hurt? I burst out. I've been close to losing him before. I can't go through that again, Drew. Drew stared at me silently for a while. He said nothing, but I could see understanding in his eyes. The door creaked open and I turned my body slightly to see Wesley standing there with a grim look. What's wrong? I asked him, anxiety gripping my heart. I was hoping that Lincoln had decided to fall back for a few more days that gave us enough time to await the help of Alpha Elias Martinez and James, but seeing Wesley's face made me fearful once again. Luna, I have to go. Charlie is in labor. A wide smile came over my face. She's going to have the baby. I smiled, but his face didn't change. What are you waiting here for? Go to her. I urged him. She is in immense pain. The full moon is nearing and the doctor had warned us about a few complications in the pregnancy are sure to happen, but she really wanted this pup. The Luna being nearby would help, so I was wondering if you could come with me. I felt my heart drop and I immediately walked towards him. I felt Drew coming behind me with fast steps. Wesley raised his head and his eyes darkened. Where are you going, Andrew? Wes asked. I'm her guard. I have to go everywhere with her. Well, so am I, and I do not want Charlie to be seen by any man. You will not come near her. Wes growled. But off Drew started, but I raised my hand, silencing him. It's okay, Drew. I'm sure Wes will be able to protect me alone. He's the size of a giant. I tried to joke but got flat looks from both of them. Let's go. I grumbled. Drew nodded and went to sit in the chair formerly occupied by me, and I followed Wes out of the room. The direction where we were going for unfamiliar. I looked around but failed to recognize the peach walls that lead somewhere unknown. This would have made me raise caution, but I trusted Wesley a lot, and knew that he would never willingly lead me into danger. Where are we going, Wesley? I asked him a few moments later when my wolf raised caution. We are going to Charlotte, Luna Rose, he said, sweating a little. Charlotte. We are walking away from the pack hospital. I asked with narrowed eyes, slowing down my steps. The hospital for some reason is triggering panic attacks, Luna. So we shifted her to a little cottage close to the border where she feels safe. He said. Why would you take Charlie close to the border in this state, Wesley? You know that the threat of rogues in Lincolndale are high. Wesley was a smart wolf. There was a reason why he was made my guard, and it wasn't only his strength. I started to wonder if trusting him was the right thing. But Charlie had stood up for me when I needed the pack's support, and I couldn't let anything happen to her. Let's go quicker. I murmured. Yes, Luna. He said with relief in his tone. He continued to walk, checking that I was following him. I could see Wesley getting more jittery, his speed increasing when I heard Drew's voice. Rose, turn back and run as fast as you can away from Wesley. Charlotte is safe and not in labor right here in the pack house. Wesley was lying. He warned me via the mind link. I froze, looking at Wesley's huge frame move. Little rogue, leave from there immediately. Arden's voice commanded. We will be coming now. My mate's voice pushed me out of my shock and I took a step back before attempting to sprint away. Don't move, Rosemary. I heard the voice of my nightmares, but I didn't stop. I felt my body being tackled to the ground and I whimpered at the pain of my hand twisting under my body. Nice to see you again, Rosemary. I looked around to see an entire army standing in rows as I looked into the green eyes of the man who snatched away my everything. Lincolndale. 29 battle wounds. You're breaching pack laws by being on my mate's territory uninvited. I calmly stated. I knew that escaping from here would be impossible without any help and fighting would be a death wish. But I would rather die than let the same thing happen to me what my mother experienced. I just couldn't leave a gem like you behind, Rosemary. You look simply ravishing. Age has done you well and your body would carry my pups better. He said, eyeing me, and I swallowed. I'd rather die than be near a monster like you, Dale. I whispered harshly. It's alpha to you, Rosemary. You are going to be my Luna, but you're not going to be my equal. Learn respect. He growled. I will never be yours, Lincolndale. You aren't an alpha by blood, and nor are you an alpha by mannerisms or upbringing. I returned a growl with a louder voice. The people behind him shifted and the coward Wesley was nowhere to be seen. My heart stung at his betrayal and I thought of his poor mate who sat happily at home waiting for her mate's arrival. I was sure that she knew nothing of the plan. I didn't need any proof for that, but a threatened and an enraged alpha mate was hard to control. I'm surrounded by wolves and he is right here. Don't come without the warriors as there are too many to handle alone. I mind-linked Arden and Castile, after which there was an echoing growl in my head. Keep him busy, little rogue, twist his mind. We will reach there in less than a minute now. I heard Arden command. I cut off my mind link and when I looked up I saw a lot of the wolves had shifted into their werewolf forms. Mind-linking your mate is not going to help you now, Rosemary. I saw a sinister glint in this senile old man's eyes. Once your alpha is dead, everyone will come to me, and so will you. I felt a slight shift in the wind and with that brought the scent of my pack members, fast approaching from the south end. I saw Dale realize and in the same second his pack members started to charge forward, along with rogues who had a bloodthirsty expression on their faces. Their aim was to end alpha rule, as usually rogues were those who were hiding, running or expelled away from their pack. They wanted vengeance and they all wanted their first conquest to be the strongest. I felt two arms around my hand and I struggled to get Dale to leave my hand. I jumped and twisted my body but his grip was too strong, and he didn't seem like he had any intention to let go. His breath was hot and repulsive on my neck, but suddenly it was gone. I saw Arden looking at me in wolf form. I could see the rage churning behind his now black eyes. In that split second that Arden was gazing at me to check if I was alright, the fallen alpha got up from the rocky ground and jumped, shifting into his own black wolf that was lowly in comparison to my mate's. The evil radiating off his body was enough to make me fear for Arden, because no matter how strong Arden was, I knew that Dale was equally vicious and was not going to play by the rules, not that there are many. I pushed off a rogue who jumped on me who was about to hit back when Castile's wolf bounded over, finishing him in one swipe of his claws. He whined slightly and I realized that my mind link was still blocked. Go to the pack house, Rosie, it's he safest for you, Castile said. Dale is here partly for me and he will be led to the pack house on a search for me. I can't risk that. There are too many pregnant female and children. I said reasonably. Then I'm staying beside you. He nodded. Your alpha needs yo. He cut off the link, attacking another wolf by the side. I used that distraction to change into my wolf and fight other oncoming wolves. None of them would kill me because their alpha needed me, but they could surely wound me and kill the people I love. I tried my best to tear through wolves around me, biting, clawing, pouncing, but there just seemed to be more and more coming. A wolf bit a chunk out of my body, but Castile came to my rescue, growling ferociously, but then he froze. The two wolves, one known and one unknown, continued to stare at each other, unaware of their surroundings, just staring silently. I heard a soft whimper escape the she-wolf, which Castile responded to with an odd silence. Castile. I tried to call him, but his mind was closed off and unreachable. I made a move to use my muzzle to get his attention, and after that came a scene I would never forget. It happened so fast that my naked eye could not comprehend what had happened. An auburn wolf turned from one of our pack warriors who he had just finished towards Cass and clawed a hand through his already bloody coat. The attack was too close to the where his heart was, and Castile fell limp on the floor. His eyes still on the wolf I was now sure was his mate, since she dropped down on the floor too. Their eyes were on the same level, and I let out a pained roar, biting out the throat of the auburn wolf, who looked at me with narrowed eyes. I could see most of our pack members' eyes divert to their fallen Beta and Arden stilled, but only for a second, since Dale attacked him again with a renewed vigor. Realizing that everyone's attention was diverted to Castile, I shifted back to my human form shortly after Castile's body did too. He was naked, and the idiot gave me a small smile, his face scrunching in pain. We have to take you to the pack doctor, I said aloud, looking at his mate who was still in wolf form, licking his wound. I will never make it, Rosie, he informed me lightly, and I let out a threatening growl. The pain of his wound restricted him from saying anything. Don't you dare say that, Castile, I yelled, and his mate looked at me with slightly angry eyes filled with tears. Rosie, I haven't marked or mated with her. I can't mind link her. Tell her I want to see her beautiful face, Castile pleaded, and I put my hand under him to lift him up, but his mate growled again. He wants to see you in your human form, and I have to take him to the pack doctor, I told her cautiously. My own cheeks were streaked with tears as more blood continued to flow from the deep cut. I noticed Arden looking at me with eyes full of pain, and I let a sob escape. The girl almost instantly shifted, and I was shocked at how innocent she looked despite being the group of rogues. Don't give up, Castile, I warned him. He rolled his head back. My beautiful mate, he told the she-wolf. She smiled a painful smile, and I saw a small frown on Castile's face. Wshwith. He paused. Your name. I heard a deep breath being taken as I lifted Castile in my arms despite the she-wolf's glare. But understanding what I was trying to do, she too helped me, and soon we were carrying the bleeding body of a huge man between us. Isobel down, I heard her say. Izzy. He smiled. His face was already death pale, and I made my footsteps faster. No one came in my way, since all our pack members were making sure there was a path cleared out for us. Keep him talking, I told her, and she nodded. But I froze when I felt a sharp pain deep in my heart. I had been getting them every time a pack member died since I was the Luna, but this one was for all. Loud echoing howls were heard throughout the woods, and I knew that was the farewell to their beloved Beta. A man who never failed to make a sad person laugh, who never thought bad of anyone, and who would rather die 10 times than see someone else suffer. 30 fatal flaw. The howling continued, and I slumped next to Castile's body where Isabel was weeping for her dead mate. I could see that she didn't have the strength for any physical task or emotional go, a matter of fact. It was about time that the triony by Lincolndale ended for once and for all, and he had it coming for a long time. Leaving a heartbroken Isabel, I stalked towards the place where the fighting density was the highest and glared at Dale with tear-filled eyes, dark with fury. His was snapped up from Arden's constant attacks, which were being blocked by other wolves for this man. His eyes found mine, and a malicious smile grew on his face. I was going to play with a greedy and cruel wolf's fatal flaw. Pride. You're a coward, I whispered. My voice sounded tired and hoarse. I'm not a coward, he growled, threatening, and I felt Arden take a step closer to me. I laughed emotionlessly. You're hiding behind unwilling people to do your bidding, forcing them to become murderers, and for what? I took a step closer to him. You're a coward because you can't fight me directly for the alpha title. Why? Afraid you'll lose to a little girl. I mocked him. Alpha title lost to you. Have you lost your mind? You have no right to it. He snarled menacingly and I smirked. You really are not the one who should be saying that, Alpha. This was the first time I had called him Alpha in his whole life, but he knew that what came out was pure sarcasm. He was a joke. The main reason you wanted to find me was not because I was a pure-blooded alpha and I would bear strong pups, but because you knew that I could end your reign of playing alpha if I chose to. This pack is mine. The Nightrise pack has always been led by the Conrad family, and you took over by wrongfully killing my parents. I screamed loud and all wolves stopped, turning to look at their alpha. No one knew that their former alpha and Luna's first child was still alive. Their eyes were filled with incredulity. The shift in behavior was almost instantaneous. You told me that the alpha and Luna were killed in the rogue attack. A man said softly. I recognized him as the current beta of the Nightrise pack. Shut up, Vulcan. He spat. You've not even told your pack the truth. I tooted. Shame on you. He made himself ready to pounce and I hissed. Why don't the two of us fight to death, Alpha? Just you and I. Unless you're afraid, of course. I tried to play my cards right, edging him on. I wasn't going to let any other person lose their lives. What good would you be to me, dead Rosemary? A dead womb is not going to carry my child well. He stated. You just need to get me unconscious and I'll come with you willingly. I bargained, crossing my fingers. I knew that he was not one to play right, but at the moment he was challenged and pretty much called weak. Okay, Rosemary, if you must insist. He sighed. It would be a pity to see your beautiful face marred. Arden's hand tightened around my own. You're not going to fight him alone. Arden ordered. Nothing is going to happen to me. Castile will watch over me and there has to be a death of a great evil to equalize the death of the purest soul. That's how the balance will be restored. I assured him. He closed his eyes and took in a deep breath. The rest of the pack stood ready, waiting for the decision of their alpha because if he disagreed the fight would go on. His grip on me loosened a little. Closing his eyes he looked up at the sky for a second before completely letting go of my hand. If he tries to take you unconscious I'm not going to let him. Arden informed me. I know. Is what my reply was. Everyone standing there formed a ring, making Dale and I stand face to face. I shifted into my white wolf whose coat was bloodied and he shifted into his wolf. There was a clash of colors as we attacked each other, growls ripping through the air. Arden stood still by the side, observing every move carefully, clenching and unclenching his fists. Drew and Benjamin were holding on to Arden to prevent him from interfering, but even their eyes held worry. I snapped at his hind leg, reaching it only to hear a satisfying crunch of a bone breaking. A low whimper escaped the Dale's mouth before he shook himself, getting into attack position again. It was now his time to strike. A range of blows and bites were thrown at me, and I tried to return them with an equal ferocity. I had too many things to take revenge of: my parents, Castile, and my pack. His claws struck my sides and I cried out in pain. I heard Drew and the rest of the pack try to control Arden, who was thrashing in their weakening grip. My leg too was being torn by Dale's claws, but my wolf was never going to give up. She pushed herself as far as she could, exhausted but still strong. I snapped my jaws and bit his muzzle that looked ugly and scarred. Exactly how it was supposed to be. The blood dripping was caused a small pool on the ground below us, and I almost cringed when I saw the opposing wolf's bloodied face. I used the opportunity to attack him in quick strikes, sending him crashing into a tree. His wolf moved slightly, but before he could steady himself I was disemboweling him satisfactorily. The adrenaline was still rushing through my veins as I heard a cheer go up, and I felt Arden gently petting my head, not minding the dirt on me. His beautiful gray eyes held worry for me and a sadness despite our victory, which was common in all. There was momentarily a happy blanket that surrounded everyone, but very briefly. I shifted back into my human form and turned my head towards the clearing where Castile's body was left behind with his mate. I felt the world spin and darken almost suddenly, before I collapsed with emotional more than physical exhaustion. 31 Awoken. It was funny that despite werewolves having an unnaturally high immunity, they were the ones who woke up in a hospital bed so often. My eyes opened up, as they eagerly seeked light after being deprived of it for so long. I got a familiar sense of déjà vu as I recalled a similar scene being replayed in my head. My first thought was of Arden, wondering if he was okay, injured or healthy. My head was killing me and I groaned, rubbing my temples as I saw a shadow loom over my head, and it seemed that my sense took a little longer to reopen since the scent of my mate hit me a few minutes too late, and I hugged him tight, afraid to let go, unable to believe that it was all over. "Little rogue, you need to rest now," he told me softly after I didn't let him go. He offered me a glass of water which I gulped down, giving my dry throat some relief. His hand ran through my hair and I snuggled into his warmth. "I'm not tired." He gave me a reprimanding look. "That's not what the doctor said, little rogue. I can't stay here any longer. How long has it been? What's happened to the wolves from the other side, and where is Castile's body?" I choked. "Where is Castile?" I asked softly. "His mate is sitting beside him, and it's been about 9 hours since you collapsed," he said, worry clear in his tone. "As for the wolves of the other side, everyone who is not guilty of murder are currently kept in the dungeons of our pack and the packs close to us. The rest and the rogues were sentenced to death." "Those people, they are so many," I murmured. "They were forced to. He was their alpha. They have families waiting for them. It's only a temporary solution to see if anyone acts out. No one feels safe with them roaming around so soon," he informed me. "But of course, since you're their alpha, they will be let out since they will have to be loyal to you." "I'm not," I started to say, but then realized that when I won over Dale, the whole pack's responsibility was automatically transferred over to the worthy and rightful alpha. I pushed myself up and stood next to Arden, who was staring at me impassively. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "Yes, I am," I said firmly, but the tone was ruined when a blush covered my cheeks seeing the open-back hospital gown. He held my face in his hands and gave me a sweet lingering peck, pulling away briefly before raining down a few more kisses on my face and my neck. "Arden," I breathed. "I don't know what I would have done happened if anything happened to you." He let out a low growl. "I lost my brother who was always there for me, little rogue, and now he's not. He's gone and there is nothing I can do to bring him back, and it's all my fault because I was incapable of protecting my pack as an alpha. I assigned Wesley as your guard, and he turned out to be the bastard who lured you into the enemy's hands." Arden sat onto the bed, clutching his face which hid it from my view. I pulled his hands away and I saw streaks of salty water sticking to his skin. I felt helpless and kissed the tears away. I could taste the salt on my lips. "Arden, you know that at this moment Castile would be honored as well as angry. Honored that the man he cared for so deeply, who he respected so much, cried for him, but be disappointed and angry that his best friend broke a pact that they made," I said, remembering Castile telling me about the promise that they made when they were younger, that if they died then they would stay strong and take care of each other's mates. "I think it's time we arranged a proper farewell for the said man, and I don't think I have the strength to do it alone. You shouldn't even be standing." He raised his hand to probably wipe his tears, but I brushed them off, not removing my hand from his slight stubble, instead leaving them there, holding his face up in my direction. "Don't start again," I warned him, and he pulled me down, making me sit on his lap. He placed his lips on my mark and almost instantly I could feel his heartbeat slow down. The funeral was a quiet affair and it passed out in a blur. Isabel refused to let us take away the body of her mate, and it took us all our emotional strength to convince her, because honestly, none of us wanted to let him go. Seeing his lifeless pale face that calmly lay in the casket was heartbreaking, and a fresh round of tears had been shed. Arden, as an alpha, said a few sentences to the crowd, but as a best friend and brother, he couldn't. I walked up to him and continued where he left off. I hugged Isabel as Castile's body was lowered into the ground by Arden and Drew, who was crying. I wasn't sure if she would appreciate the gesture, but I couldn't help myself. Her hands were in front of her chest and her face was pressed against my body. They covered the casket with mud themselves and smoothened it out. 7 months passed by since Castile's funeral and everyone could feel his loss. Isabel, who wanted to learn more about her deceased mate, stayed with our pack and heard stories of how Castile was and of all his antics. There was occasionally a genuine laugh from her side, which made everyone happy because she was like an empty shell. She barely knew him, but the mate bond had these two connected from birth. And this made me realize that the mate bond could let you do anything for your mate, betray your parents and your family, or simply kill you. A kiss on my temple made me aware of my surroundings, and I blushed when I saw the members of my pack look at me with amused smiles. The Nightrise pack. "I want to merge our packs together. Traveling between the two lands will cause problems, and as a united front we will be even more powerful," Have lesser people trying to attack our packs and I will be able to spend more time with my neglected mate. I joked and the senior wolves laughed. Your parents would have been so proud of you, dear. If only we had known earlier. Marcus, an old man who told me that he was my father's very close friend, said regretfully. No one knew apart from one man who was killed trying to rescue me. But that man was my savior. I said. Let's vote, shall we, gentlemen? A bright smile slipped onto my face to hide the echoing pain. I felt for the loss of almost all I loved. The votes were all positive and I was excited to tell Arden that I wouldn't have to be away from him so much anymore. I turned the doorknob of our house and quietly walked in, tiptoeing in, and was surprised to see all the lights out. Arden, I called out into the dark, my wolf vision giving me easy access to everything around me. I'm here. He replied and I followed his voice to the living room where I was shocked to see small glittery stars hanging from the ceiling and fairy lights were randomly hung, which made the area look simply beautiful, and I smiled when I saw Arden standing with a confident smile on his face, but I could sense his nervousness. Arden, this is beautiful. And I had never felt more special in my entire life. You're beautiful, was his reply. So you can choose today, Ariel or Princess Diaries. He held up the 2 CDs and I gave him a suspicious look. Are those really the options? I asked him with raised eyebrows. Unless you want me to put something else. He shrugged and I squealed, taking Princess Diaries and playing it. I curled up next to my mate who put an arm around me, hugging me close enough to barely leave any place between us. I pecked Arden's lips, which curved upwards. Sometime into the movie I heard Arden get up and say something about pizza and I grinned, shooing him off to collect it from the waiting delivery boy. He returned with the big box and paused the movie. With such a fancy setting, pizza feels out of place. I commented and Arden's eyes widened. Did you want something else? I can order it or we can. Hey, it's out of place 'cause it belongs in my tummy, now open the box. I urged him, dying to get the cheesy slice in my hand. I'll be back in a minute, you start. Okay then. I opened the box eagerly, but what I saw had tears welling in my eyes. I love you to the moon and back, Rosemary Elizabeth Conrad, and my life wouldn't have and will not be the same. When I first saw you and realized you were my mate, the one thing I was not expecting you to do was run away from me. But that's what you did. And you did it again and again. Believe it or not, but the first moment I felt in love with you was when you attacked Rianne, when I saw you fight for what's yours. We have gone through so much together. And despite being an alpha, I suck at giving speeches. He paused. I thought of different ways of doing it. I wrote a poem for you which is now torn into pieces. Preparing for this proposal had me tearing out my hair in frustration. He laughed. To be honest, if you rejected this proposal I would have carried you to the altar and married you. It may be wrong, but with you everything is right. He stood up from his kneeling position and picked the ring out from the center of the pizza, where it lay on a raised plastic object. My little rogue, will you marry me? Arden smiled. Do I have an option? I asked playfully, with my watery eyes probably shining with happiness. Not really, but it would make things easier for me. He joked. Then how could I ever say no? I kissed him, weaving my hand in his hair, my body tingling with unfamiliar need. I put my hand forward and he slipped on the ring onto my fingers, which luckily wasn't sticky at all. There is luckily no cheese stuck on the ring. I laughed. Arden gave a husky rumble and delicately kissed each of my fingers. The lust and live mixed in a tornado of emotions. I couldn't control my desires anymore, and I had no reason to. He was mine and I was his. My lips found his once more as I deepened it further. My heart was beating erratically as one thing led to another, and soon our clothes all lay scattered across the room. That was how we completed the mating process and made love to each other for the first time. And it was a night that I would remember my whole mortal life and after. Epilogue. Rachel. I warned her in the same admonishing tone that I had mastered over the last few years. She laughed out, looked up at me and pouted slightly, leaning slightly on her right ankle because her left one was injured due to her inability to listen to anyone. I swear I won't move from my spot after this. She grinned and I shook my head at her childish antics and whims that she always managed to get completed her way somehow. She may be 28 years old, but she still acted like the same mischievous child that I had brought up. And it seemed like being a playful nuisance ran in the family, since her son was very naughty too. I guess my free-spirited rogue side was to be blamed, as you could often catch Arden saying that any good quality passed down was all him apparently. Grandpa. I heard the infectious giggles of my grandson break out of the room adjacent to the one that I currently occupied, and shortly after in walked Arden with a happy Lucas sitting on his shoulders, clutching my husband's hair tightly with his small hands. Arden's handsome face as usual made my heart flutter, and despite being with this man since 46 years, I still felt the same attraction and desire for my mate that I did all those years back. His formerly black hair was now snow white with only a few stray black strands that somehow survived all the tension and age, and the deep smile lines on his face gave my mate a carefree look opposed to his signature grumpy stare when I first met him. His eyes were yet the same, and they were still my favorite individual feature of him. "Grandpa walk." The angel laughed, and Arden entertained him by replying, "Yes, master." "Lucas," I cooed, lifting him from Arden's strong shoulders. "Grandpa is no more a young man, Luke. He will hurt his back." I teased my mate, who frowned, looking at me offended. "I'm perfectly strong and undeniably young." Arden grumbled, and I pulled his left cheek with my free hand. "Sure," I scoffed. "Do you doubt my strength, little rogue?" Arden raised his eyebrows, and I gave him a cheeky smile. "Always Artie," I playfully retorted. Rachel took Lucas from my arms, which allowed Arden lifted me up bridal style. "Put me down," I squealed, and my daughter smirked. "I'm just going to go check on the food preparations, with the whole family dropping in today." She winked at Arden and left with a dazzling smile sent in my direction, hobbling along. "You've stolen Rachel over to your side," I whined, swinging my feet in the air. "Well, all her brothers are their mama's boys." He grinned. I thought of my 4 boys and then looked up at him sheepishly. "Well, that's true." I laughed. He swung me around once and then laid me down on the sofa, giving me a light kiss. I pulled him closer, kissing him more passionately. "You." I broke away from the kiss to see Lillian, our oldest granddaughter, standing there with a wrinkled nose showing her disgust. "Lillian, darling," Arden said. "Hey, Grandpa, can you two not, She trailed off. "Express our love," I questioned. "How do you think your father was born?" She looked up at the ceiling and groaned. Rolling her eyes at us, she said, "TMI, Grandma." "Don't roll your eyes at me, young woman," I scolded, and a smile broke out on her face. She apologized, and from behind her I saw her father and mother walk, smirking slightly. Lillian's younger brothers ran towards me and gave me a kiss on each cheek, and in return I pulled theirs lovingly. In the next hour our whole family piled into our house, and our driveway was full of cars. There was a cheerful atmosphere that took over the house. Everyone sat down and shared what was new in their life. The younger kids went to the pool to beat the scorching here, while the older ones sat hogging up the living room, fiddling with their phones. "How are you guys?" Sean asked my mate and I, and we smiled. "We are good. It's very peaceful here, and Mrs. Patrick is on leave since her daughter is pregnant." I mentioned our housekeeper, who had been with us ever since my first child was born. "Mrs. Patrick is so old she should retire now," Sean replied, and the rest of them agreed. "She has refused our offers, and I don't think anything we do will make her retire." Arden laughed. We spoke for another 4 hours, talking about their children, how tough they were to handle as teenagers, and the younger ones' toy-sharing problems. When our family left, we had a content smile on our face and a soul 100 times younger. "We have done good." Arden kissed my temple. "We have, haven't we?" I rested my head on his shoulder. "I love you, Arden." "I love you too, little rogue, and I'm blessed to be able to call you mine." He nudged me softly. "I will always be the alpha's little rogue. Extra Wesley." The large man stood by the forest with a grim look on his face, one that was sketched with years of hardships and pains, and all the time the man spent without the support of his mate and family. He stood there quietly for almost an hour, knowing that the person he was waiting for would arrive. She never failed to disappoint him. Unknowingly, the girl was giving the man his happiness, but at the same time giving him immense sadness. The crunch of fallen dried leaves alerted him of the familiar stranger's arrival. The crunch was first slow and then got a little more rapid and almost came to a stop when a young girl came into the panoramic frame of the lurker's vision. "Quinn," he whispered in a voice so low that he could barely hear himself. The girl's head snapped up and took a deep whiff of her surroundings before she settled into the grass, plucking it at, sighing to herself. A few salty drops fell from the man's eyes, which were common on these visits. He was a rogue and could not wait in one place for too long, so wherever he went by the side of the lake, He made sure to stop by for at least a day to catch a glimpse of a fragment of his sunshine. The man was caught up in his own thoughts and did not realize when the sounds of another heartbeat joined his daughter's soft, steady one. The man looked up and his eyes caught onto a female wolf around his age who radiated power. She stared at his face for a minute, and then her gaze shifted to the teenaged girl who was smiling innocently and trying to remove the twigs from her tangled hair. Her eyes flickered with brief hesitation and she offered the rugged man a smile and a nod of acknowledgement. She knew. It had been 15 years since he last stepped foot into the Packland. He was unsure if he would still be considered a traitor, but since he had threatened the Luna, his Luna, he knew the punishment would always be impending around the corner for one of the most serious crimes that can be committed by wolf folk. The fear of death no longer kept him away from his family. Every day his heart bled in self-pity. His heart longed for his Charlotte, the woman he would die for, kill for and commit a million crimes over and over again. The Luna closed her eyes and he saw a ghost of a frown marring her features. Her dark hair swayed in the wind as she turned around and shifted mid-stride into the ferocious, yet caring white beast that was spoken about in all the lands of the wolves. The gratitude that swept over the man's human form was overwhelming, and he barely caught the sly glance she threw his way. He continued to look at his daughter with all sorts of what-ifs running through his mind. What if he hadn't succumbed to Lincolndale's powerless threats? What if he hadn't betrayed his pack? What if he had worked a little harder so as to not do something that would remove the Alphas, Lunas and more importantly his mate's trust from him? He thought of the large number of his children that could be running around the garden, calling him daddy, knowing who he was. He regretted not having enough trust in his Alpha to protect his family. He should have known that Alpha Arden would not let anything happen to his pregnant Charlotte, but he was terrified. Once again both he and his daughter were left alone in each other's presence, free to bask in the comfort her wolf was providing his. The male werewolf was so tempted to introduce himself. I feel lost. The girl's voice rang clear through the silence. As soon those words escaped from her mouth a rustle was heard. She looked around bewildered, only realizing for the first time in years that she wasn't alone. She stood up in a hurry, crouching low in an attack position. But something told her that this extra presence wasn't harmful and wasn't anything to be scared of. Call it her sixth sense, but she also knew that this wasn't the first time someone was watching her. Who are you? She said bravely and loud. Come out, don't make me call the Alpha. Wesley shivered slightly at the warning but didn't move. The girl said again, it's your last warning. Her voice quivered a little. The man didn't want his own daughter to be frightened on him, and he contemplated going out to show himself, but a force held him back. He knew he couldn't stay there for long and thus he shifted into his wolf as quickly as he could and took slow but sure steps forward, almost as if he was playfully teasing his daughter to come catch him. His huge head poked out from the bushes and the girl gasped. He shook his muzzle, as if asking her not be afraid of him. He took in her entire face properly, a face that was so similar to his mother's that it comforted him but also gave a bitter twang. He couldn't let his scent be recognized so he ran, his paws heavy on the ground. He took enough time to hear his daughter say, "Guardian Angel." His heart warmed. He would return and maybe one day have the courage to face his mate, who without doubt would be a force of fury, but his love for her would be clear and hopefully enough to push away all her worries and bring out all her passion once again. He would remain chaste for 1,000 years, just to have one final taste of Charlotte Johnson, the only woman who would ever capture his heart. Extra Drew. Andrew Victor Dunst, you better be here before I count 3, or you're going to be sleeping in a dog kennel for the rest of your life, screeched Gabrielle, a pretty redhead with a temper to match her flaming red hair. Walking into the Dunst household at that moment would be a comical sight. Andrew, more lovingly known as Drew, was on the run from his wife who looked ready to kill someone, and blue. Yes, you read it correctly. Her once clear skin was a very alien invasion color of blue. Or to describe her better, she looked like Jennifer Lawrence from X-Men. But look. I told you that you would make the perfect Mystique. His voice resounded from somewhere in the house. And I told you that you would make a wonderful wall hanging. She rolled her eyes, taking in a deep breath to figure out in which room her mate was crouching. Her wolf was in a playful mood, but she was not, and if Drew knew what was good for him, he should have been begging for forgiveness in front of her hours ago. She took slow steps up the stairs and smirked when he heard a soft shuffle and a loud bang from the attic. Drew winced at the sound and scrambled quickly out of the window. He landed hard on the group and looked up, glancing at the spot where Jessie was sure to appear in no time. And he was right. Barely a second later she poked her head through the window and looked straight at him. Her brown eyes were glaring daggers and he quickly shifted into wolf form and bounded into the forest in full throttle. Drew smiled as his mate neared him and he gave his ass a playful shake towards the wolf who was trying to catch up with him. All this time Gabby kept sending him threats through the mind link, each more creative than the last one. "Catch me if you can, mate." Drew teased her and she pushed her legs faster. Drew was so busy in challenging her that he didn't realize when he was close to a big oak tree, causing him to smash into it head first. Laughs echoed through his mind and Gabby made sure to project it loud and clear. This story was going to reach Luna Rosie soon enough, seeing that the two girls were very close, and after that forgetting this small incident would be impossible. "I don't know if I'm yet supposed to catch you if I can, mate, 'cause it will be an unfair advantage to me." Gabby gave a wolfy grin. She stretched her two paws in front and making sure that the ground was safe and clean she lowered herself onto the forest floor, bushy tail swinging from side to side. "Stop staring at me like that. It's scary and creepy. Send me lustful glances if you want to stare." Drew whined. Gabby stood up from her spot and crouched, pouncing on Drew, who prepared himself for the weight of another wolf. She landed right next to him and gave him a small lick on his nose. "I'll look at you how I want to, but you mister better find somewhere else to sleep till this color fades always from me." "Like blue. What the hell were you thinking?" she exclaimed. "Blame X-Men if you want to, that's where I got thinking. I never knew you had the capability to think, Drew." "I'm shocked." She gave another cheeky grin that exposed her canines. "I'm offended." He swiped his paw on her back lightly and she rolled onto her back, digging her muzzle under his body. Drew suddenly stood up and shifted into his human form, placing his hand slowly on her nose to check if she was going to attack. She rolled her eyes and pushed her head under his coarse palms. He grinned and started to pet her gently. She opened her paw and clasped his hand tightly with her wet mouth. "Gabriella." He wiped his hand on his naked body. "Put some clothes on, you idiot." Gabby ordered him. "You are such a mean mate. Why don't you bake choco chip cookies for me like Tia does for her mate? Why don't you find another mate? Or let me burn our house down, your wish." She huffed, dropping his hand and strutting away. Drew took up a little speed in his human form to catch up with her, and threw on a pair of shorts he found tied to a nearby tree. "Gabby baby, I'm sorry." She was yet too far away. In the few seconds that he took to put on some clothes she gained a significant lead. "I hate you," he heard her say. "I'm sorry." He ran. He didn't want to shift back into his wolf, so he followed her on foot. Gabrielle's anger had started to dim by the time they reached into the heart of their territory where majority of the families resided. A little girl of barely 3 or 4 years ran towards Gabby's wolf. "Wolfie." She giggled. Her mother ran behind her, ready to pull her daughter away if the wolf wasn't in a friendly mood. Gabrielle licked the little girl, which made her laugh, and she nudged the mother as if to tell her that it's okay. "Mommy, is this Aunt Gabby?" the little girl asked, and her mother nodded. The wary expression exchanged with relaxation. Drew walked up and threw an arm around Gabrielle's huge wolf head, whispering sorry again and again. "You are an arse," she told him, and he agreed. "I am. And I am not letting you off the hook so soon." "I know," Drew said, crossing his fingers behind his back. "I'm also making you my personal slave for a month," she informed him. He sighed but accepted that condition, knowing that his mate was one tough cookie to crack, and his wisest decision would be to listen to her quietly. She gave a wolfish smirk, which actually would have looked quite creepy to a person seeing it for the first time. But Drew didn't bat an eyelid. She was going to make the next month worth it, and she was definitely going to make sure that Drew was taken care of properly. Feathers coating his skin will be a nice fresh look for him, she thought, smiling, plans forming in her head. Don't let the story end. Subscribe to continue our wolf pack legend.